This is the Quip and Quill podcast. I'm your host, Deven Rue, professional fantasy cartographer and illustrator.
My name is James Haeck. I'm an RPG designer from the beautiful realm of Seattle, Washington. Deven and I have worked together several times before, usually when we're doing stuff for Critical Role. I think Explorer's Guide to Wildemount and Call of the Netherdeep are the two things that we've most involved on together, which were immense fun. I've done a handful of other things too. Most recently, I've been with Ghostfire Gaming, a wonderful Australian 5e publisher. They publish the dark fantasy setting of Grim Hollow, but also a new setting which I created myself that I am very proud of. It's just funded at over 10 times its goal on Kickstarter, the Aetherial Expanse. A planar setting, a setting of swashbuckling, high seas fantasy on the astral plane. Very, very piratical, extremely adventurous, and magnificently magical. To me, it's D&D taken to its logical extreme. And so, check out Ghostfire Gaming. I'm freelancing for them right now, as RPG people tend to be. I worked with them full time for a bit, and now I'm back to sailing the freelance seas. Yarr.
And the first thing I want to ask, right?
What is the first thing you want to ask, Deven?
Pirating setting? Why wasn't I involved?
Yes. So I'm happy to talk about the Aetherial Expanse. Oh my goodness, let me talk about it all day long. I wish that we had recorded like 2 weeks ago when this Kickstarter was still running. I would have shouted it to the rooftops in this case. But no, this was one of the coolest projects. I mean, this is ostensibly a world building podcast, so I'll start on topic, shockingly enough. This is a project that started when I was the head of Fables at Ghostfire Gaming, which is kind of a 5e adventure path line. We produce 3 immense Fables seasons. Each one is something like 400 pages worth of D&D adventure. And the first was set in their dark fantasy setting of Grim Hollow. It was recently repackaged in omnibus format as Citadel of the Unseen Sun, which went out on, it wasn't Kickstarter, it was that new RPG. It was that new platform. It was the Backer Kit crowdfunder. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And the second season of Fables was Pirates of the Aetherial Expanse. And I assembled quite the crew in order to fashion that from basically nothing. I started the setting guide myself and watched about 100 pirate movies and shows from,
of course,
from Black Sails to rewatching the Pirates of the Caribbean movies to seeing Our Flag Means Death to watching the old Errol Flynn stuff, Captain Blood, things like that.
Because I really should be in there.
The what now?
Cutthroat.
Oh, Cutthroat. No, I don't think I
with
saw
Gina
that
Davis?
No.
That is a fantastic pirate movie.
Absolutely. Wait, when was that? When did that come out?
Oh, that's an older one. That's got to be like 80s. Yeah.
Very nice. I wasn't looking at the 80s at all for pirate stuff. I was looking at like modern day and classic Hollywood.
I mean, I could understand, but I mean, Gina Davis was brilliant. I love that movie.
Well, maybe I should talk about the Aetherial Expanse setting just a little bit before I get into the weeds of its creation. I know we have a lot of people who love to hear about the RPG industry listening to this, so the BTS will happen later. But first off, so Pirates of the Aetherial Expanse and the book that's now following that up, just the Aetherial Expanse setting guide. It details a sea of starlight that floats within the endless bounds of the astral plane, the plane between the planes. And within this sea are islands, comets that have struck the expanse after hurtling through the astral plane for who knows how long. All sorts of other bits of debris and space dust and space rocks that have begun to coalesce into a chain of islands, vast island chains. And over time, they have started to become populated by plant life and over a longer period of time, people life. You know how when you put a bag of holding into a portable hole in D&D, it devours it all, right? It implodes and it pops open to the astral plane. Well, it dumps all of its contents onto the astral plane, and many of those things over the eons have landed on the Ethereal Expanse, including plants, seeds, the beginnings of life. And so this sort of thriving, unique, almost kind of dreamlike plant culture has started to grow on these little islands. So these vast jungles of alien plants, they have this very sort of vaporwave aesthetic to them, with all of these sort of glowing galactic styles and strange neon glows to them. And over time, people from the material plane, from the many, many worlds of material plane, have begun to learn of this expanse and of the plane-faring artifacts that past explorers of the expanse have left behind. There's quite a great history to this place. But the modern conflict comes when two nations of different worlds of the material plane both find the magical means of entering the Ethereal Expanse. There's the Caroline Empire, which actually became the focus of our third season of Fables, a kind of James Bond pastiche. And there's the Kingdom of Eris, which is a sort of a more mercantile, kind of Venetian-style, Dutch-style realm. And so, both of them have dreams of conquest. One is in classic imperial style. One is sort of a more mercantile conquest. And they do what all empires in the Age of Sail do. They start to colonize, and they start to take things that do not belong to them. And though this is a sort of blasted, lifeless plane originally, there are all sorts of people who have broken off from these two sinister factions. Most importantly, of them, the Drakes, the pirates, who have settled on a astral island cluster that they call the Isle of Drakes. It's all very elementally reactive. The elements of the astral plane are something I could go on and on about forever. I'm trying not to get distracted talking about this one serious, the core political conflict here, because it's I want to go off in another direction, being like, yes, and there are rifts to all the other planes that pop into the astral plane, because it's highly permeable, and there are these constellations in the sky that are permanent. They're not constellations of stars, they're all permanent planar rifts to the elemental planes. So at the 4 compass points, there are these big constellations, and they're elementally aligned, and also they're worshipped as gods. And there's all of these little details of the setting that that I'm so enamored with, that either I or members of the other Ethereal Expanse team kind of came up with. But to sum it all up, to say nothing of the astral merfolk species that you can play, or the astral emergent species that you can play, sort of a spiritual consciousness of the plane that has found a corpse thrown overboard and kind of re-inhabited it and patched it up with astral magic, giving their bones look like constellations, their skin have a galactic sheen to them. Despite just gliding completely over those two new species and all the new ethereal monsters that dwell within the sea, creatures that have been kind of mutated by the potent force of the ether that makes up the sea, the sea of the expanse, or the new ship combat rules that go in there. People have often said of those rules that they were what Spelljammer was missing. That this is the Spelljammer that people were looking for, because this is all Age of Sail stuff. This is Master and Commander stuff, where you are on your ship, and you are determining who has the weather gauge, who can dictate the attack. It's this very in-depth and satisfying minigame that gives everyone in the party a particular role on the ship, whether it's gunner, helm, captain, first mate, quartermaster, medic, or what is the term? Ship surgeon, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All of those things, whatever you're doing in the combat, there's something you can do to provide the ship with an edge. I could spend the whole, hour plus just talking about the setting, but to give the broadest of overviews here, it is the most swashbuckling, high magic, dreamlike, weird fantasy setting you can imagine, and it's filled with gorgeous art and maps. And were this a visual medium, I would be throwing beautiful images at you to entice you to come and visit the Ethereal Expanse with me and the rest of the pirates.
We will just have to put a link in the description and everything else when I share this, so everyone can go devour art.
Yes. And so the setting book has just been kickstarted. We were looking for $20,000. We had $200,000, which is wonderful. The book is going to be fantastic. It's going to use the setting guide that you find in the older adventure. A very mini setting guide as its base, and then expand explosively outward from there into all brand new stuff, more monsters, more magic items, so something like 12 new subclasses to suit the Expanse. And then if you want to look back a little bit, there is already an entire massive adventure campaign that is set to go for this setting. It's funny, we did things a little bit backwards. We made the adventure before we made the campaign setting. But you still had everything you need to play it, whether or not you have the book. It's something like, I say mini campaign setting, but it's still something like 80 pages, basically.
Not so much mini.
I know, yeah. I mean, and that was such a wonderful collaborative effort between me and Gabe Hicks and Sam Mannell, who did the ship rules, and bits and pieces from all of the adventures that the rest of the Pirates team created. Anthony Joyce, Sadie Lowry, who worked with us on Netherdeep, Jen Vaughn, Kat Kruger, Ann Gregerson, Sarah Madsen, Allison Huang. No, but it was really an incredible crew of people to work with, and the adventure just it ranges the gamut from simple piracy at the beginning to full-on naval battles against supernaturally equipped flagships, while cosmic island-sized dragon turtles, breach from the sea. I mean, it goes from 0 to 2,000 over the course of this adventure, and it's so fun.
Was this the first Kickstarter you've been involved in?
No. I've excuse me. No, I've been involved in a number of Kickstarters, mostly because of Ghostfire. That's kind of their primary way of getting projects off the ground. I think the first Kickstarter that I was really deeply involved in was for the Valakan clans, which was a cool 2-book project. That was the last full project I did when I was full-time with Ghostfire. It was a Viking-inspired setting guide and adventure book that took place in the sort of frozen north of their Grim Hollow setting. And so my sort of co-creator, Sean Merwin, he was leading the creation of the setting guide, which also had a bunch of subclasses that I had a hand in. Very cool, sort of 4th edition inspired martial maneuvers stuff, which I loved creating. I really want to go deep on that someday. And then I created an adventure for that called Saga of the Seasons, which I just cannot wait to have in hand. This thing funded probably back in January of this year. That sets you as a warrior in a brand new Valakan clan, a Viking clan, basically. And just as many Viking sagas dealt with the passage of time and the seasons within the year, you basically play out one full year of your life in the clan. And it starts in spring when everyone is planting seeds, and the harsh winter has just rolled off the mountains. The passes are starting to thaw and open. The sea ice is starting to thaw. You're basically preparing for the year to come. And then summer comes and you go off to raid because you're Vikings and you must raid, you must pillage. And you go off to the sort of Germanic-inspired realm south of Yurok Empire, and you plunder, and you have this very fun little tactical scenario that uses brand new mass combat raiding rules we developed for this book. Then in fall, you bring your spoils of war home, and you deal with this very sort of much more intimate at-home adventure with political intrigue. Who will, there's an assassination attempt on your clan's chief, but will you defend him? Will you decide to become the usurper yourself? There are just a lot of player choices all throughout spring and summer and autumn that will affect what quests are available to you, that will affect how the NPCs in your village think of you. You can really build up quite a strong sort of like social, I don't want to say social network, that makes you sound like Zuckerberg. There are very strong social relationships that can be created in your Valakan clan based on how you treat the NPCs, what you do for them, the way you behave. And it's very fertile ground for a DM to create adventures that are not just deeply involved in combat, because it's a Viking adventure. There's a lot of great combat encounters in this, but that really open you up towards the idea of working together and finding friends and alliances and breaking them and serving your own self-interest. And whichever way you want to take that. And it all comes to a head in the final season of winter, where all of a sudden the creatures of winter's night start to crawl from their burrows and make war upon your village in the harshest time of the year, just where, even the weather itself will kill you stone dead. Also, all of these horrible supernatural threats start to come out, and you need to rally a defense of your own village, kind of putting you on the opposite, using those very same raiding rules, but now instead of being the raider, you are now the raided, and you must use everything, every social connection, every bit of treasure you gained, all of that in order to fight off a pretty intense supernatural threat that will gladly chew you up and spit out your bones. Just one more upstart clan lost to the winter.
I have to say, I love listening to you talk about games. I do.
Thank you.
One of the things that because I've talked about it numerous times. Everyone knows I am huge into world building. I want to be as immersed into a world as I possibly can be, and I apply a lot of that to the maps and stuff that I make, and it's. I love when someone else is incredibly enthusiastic about it and has so much fun doing what they do, but and absolutely not shy in any way to talk about it. So I'm gonna ask, what is your origin story for the tabletop space?
Oh my goodness, it's quite a story. I mean, it's quite a journey from where I started to, leading setting guides and creating 500-page adventures for over the course of like a year. It really starts with me in my college dorm room. It starts with me having moved away from my hometown of Seattle and going to Orange, California, south of LA. It starts with me being a theater major who loved high school theater. It starts with me kind of hoping that I would find a D&D group filled with rambunctious theater kids that loved role-playing as much as I did. And it started with me not finding that in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, no.
Started with me being very, very lonely in college. Because, and it's so funny now because I can see people who were in my theater department, like on Instagram, liking reels about D&D and stuff like that. And I'm like, where the fuck were you in 2014 when I was just a little child alone in a new state?
Trying to play my favorite fucking game.
I just wanted to roleplay. Yeah.
What the fuck? Yeah.
And it's even funnier to think that, you know, this is just a year or two before Critical Role begins, right? And kind of revolutionizes what we think of, you know, what is nerdy and what is cool. And by the time I graduated, I'd even started to see that change among my peers. Like, is D&D garbage? Is it like the nerdiest of the nerd shit? Or is it something that, you know, that a cool LA actor can be a part of?
Right.
And of course, the real ones are both, you know, the deepest kind of nerd you can be, and an extremely sort of role-play loving, outgoing theater kid type of person. But those, you know, it takes some work to find those people. They're anyway. I've gotten off topic. Ultimately, I am alone in my dorm room, right? And I found a couple of D&D groups. They don't really last, and it's like they're. I'm having a good time, but I feel like my DMing isn't being appreciated in the way I want it to be, and like that is pure youthful ego on my part, right? It's like it's not perfect, so some of this is on me, obviously, but I'm just like, okay, I think what happened is I watched my first ever Matt Colville video, and he was talking about the cult of the reptile god, which in classic Matt Colville fashion,
I was going to say that's a good impersonation of it.
I like Matt Colville a lot.
Oh, I love
listen to a lot of his videos. And so he's talking about the cult of the reptile god, and he's talking about how it's basically the perfect D&D adventure. And I'm starting to think, because, you know, I'm in literature analysis mode, I'm in like play script analysis mode, I'm very, you know, thinking like a college student. I'm like, well, Cult of the Reptile God actually has a really perfect 3-act structure to it that cleaves onto the 3 pillars of 5e gameplay, because 5e had just come out. It was the fall of my sophomore year in college when 5e comes out. So I'm desperately gathering these books after having run the 5e playtest for the first year. And I'm looking at these 3 pillars they're talking about of social interaction and combat and exploration. I'm thinking, well, Cult of the Reptile God starts in a village where you're investigating and trying to find out what members of the village have been inducted into this insidious cult. So there's social interaction right there. And then at the end of Act 1, you go on this big wilderness adventure in order to find the lair of the cult, which you've learned about in Act 1. So there's Act 2, that's exploration. And then in Act 3, you find the dungeon and you battle your way through it until you find Explicita Defilus, the spirit naga that controls the cult. And you either beat the crap out of the naga or you die trying. So there's combat, and there's Act 3, and you've got the whole 3-act structure there. I'll bet that anyone can get started writing a D&D adventure if they have that 3-act structure in mind and they don't get too, like, overly complicated about it. So there's one side. The other side is I am on Tumblr all the time. Mm-hmm. And I am reading about D&D all the time, and I'm talking about D&D on Tumblr all the time. And it comes to the point where I'm really starting to get into these deep conversations about some of the strange pulp assumptions that D&D makes. These are primarily centered around racial morality.
Yes.
Right? Drow are always evil. Orcs are always evil. You know, the 3rd edition monster manual stuff. 3rd edition was my first edition. Every monster has typically chaotic evil. Always chaotic evil. You know,
right.
Sometimes neutral evil. It's stuff like that. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
It's always chaotic evil. You know, for a demon, I can get that. You know, they are a spirit of pure malice. Yes, they are always chaotic evil. Makes sense to me. But like a goblin, always chaotic evil. What's going on here? Not only is that, you know, not only does it have shades of racism to it, of the sort of colonial racism that led to, you know, like Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan, which is also a contemporary of Robert Howard's Conan, which of course was the major inspiration for Gary Gygax in early D&D, right? It's all kind of in there, this sort of concept of going to wondrous places filled with evil locals who are, you know, insufficiently advanced and plundering it. You know, is D&D explicitly racist? I can't answer that question, but does it have colonially inspired roots? Yes, 100%. It cannot, that is simply a fact. And so, you know, not only is that true, but it's just fodder for broad storytelling. I almost said lazy storytelling. That's not necessarily true, but it's unspecific. And to me, specificity is the heart of good stories. It's the heart of good D&D campaigns, right? It's like you can't just run a D&D module off the shelf and have it be a great campaign. You can be a good campaign, maybe even a very good campaign. But unless you are doing bespoke work to make things very specific to the stories that your characters are embarking upon, and unless you as a player are making specific choices to engage with the material that's presented before you, it's not going to be a great campaign. It just won't reach that benchmark. And the same goes for a novel, right? You know, this is like creative writing 101 stuff, but like use detail, use specifics, paint a picture, because words can paint a picture. And the picture that racial alignment in D&D presents is a very broad one. It's a pulpy one. And that's not necessarily, you know, that can be genre appropriate for a pulpy game. But as we've seen, a lot of D&D, not just now, but for many, many decades into the past, has had sort of higher aspirations than broad storytelling. It really wants to get emotional. This is not just about going to a dungeon and kicking down a door, killing monsters and taking their loot. No, it's about the contents of someone's heart. It's about romances. It's about epic legacies. It's about grand histories. Yeah.
If your table is all in agreement that it is about going to dungeons, kicking down doors, and taking loot, there's no wrong way to play as long as everyone at the table agrees that's how they want to play.
Yes, that is 100% true.
We just don't particularly do that.
Well, I mean, I just spent 15 minutes describing how pretentious a D&D playing theater kid I was, where I needed other actors to be at my table, or else I couldn't have a good time.
I needed thespian D&D.
I need a thespian. No, you don't understand. I need thespians. Yeah. So,
of the highest caliber.
I'm hearing all of these stories from people who are like, I really don't like the way that all drow are portrayed this way, you know, especially when they're a sort of matriarchal society. What is this saying about us? You know, is this sexist on top of it being potentially racist? Like, yeah, right, exactly. So, you know, if you make your only women-led society in the entire setting always evil, I think that says something about you as an author.
Right. And let's just, you know, I'm old enough to have played with the original rules and being told that as a female, I can only have strength up to a certain limit. I couldn't be certain classes. And this does promote other people at the table to take it further, you know, and to horrible extremes at times.
This is the thing, you know, when people, racist and sexist typically say, you know, you're ruining my D&D by taking out all of these things. You know, they're basically using my same argument just from the other direction. You're sanding away all of these interesting rough edges, right? You're taking away these specifics to make it this sort of bland woke stew, and I'm making them more more eloquent than they deserve to be here, but. You know, if that argument has been leveled against the kind of changes that, you know, even as a college kid, I was like, I want to see those changes happen. I don't want to have this very, you know, this bizarre take on what a person can be in my D&D. That doesn't speak to me.
Right.
And I think it may be actually immoral.
Right. Just something implies that. Yeah.
I want to create something better than this. I want to guide D&D in a direction that's better than this. Or and because I was a college kid, I was very sort of like, I will shoulder this burden. I will do this. In the years since then, I've mellowed out. This is a community effort. This is not about me and my savior complex. This is about everyone. This is about everyone coming together into a community to make a game that people love to play together.
Yes.
And so when you excise bits of the game like that, which, to their credit, are specific. They're specifically bad, but they're specific.
Right.
What you wind up creating is you create a more open playing field for people to build new, better, more interesting, more nuanced specifics instead. I think what has happened over the past 10 years, D&D has certainly become more popular, and that has definitely made it more appealing to what I will describe as corporate blandness. But I trust the D&D creative team enough to not give in to that, right? People like Mackenzie Darmus and Dan Dillon, and to say nothing of folks like Chris Perkins, who have been there forever. Those are incredibly creative people, and they're tasked with a challenging job of making something that is broadly applicable to mass market appeal, while also having creative merit. And I think they're doing
answering
a fine job.
to a corporate overlord.
Yeah, no joke.
That is hard. I did corporate for years before, I ever got back into art and then ended up in cartography. And there's just so much. I don't care how good of a person you are or how good your intentions are. If you have to answer to a board, and a higher up, as high up at the chain as Hasbro has, man, you are absolutely fucking shouting into the wind. Like, you are barely going to be heard. Hopefully you do, though.
Well, and I mean, Hasbro is basically as corporate as it gets. I mean, until you start going to Wall Street banking, I can't think of anything more, more monolithic than Hasbro.
Exactly.
And, Wizards employees have said on many occasions, whether it's Ray Winninger or Kyle Brink or whoever, basically saying that, Hasbro actually lets us alone most of the time. And I take that with a certain level of skepticism. I don't think they're outright lying to us, but I do think there's a certain bit of spin there where it's like, okay, sure, Jan. Yeah, I mean, like, maybe Hasbro doesn't tell you what to put in the books, but you do have to meet their sales projections. Yes. So it's like you make decisions based on what Hasbro wants. They might just not be telephoning the president every morning to,
I don't think there's some old boomer sitting there going, we need to have this in the book,
Yeah.
But I do think that there has to be a particular standard that, first of all, anyone who's ever done corporate art would know you have to answer not only to your art director, but your art director answers to someone else entirely. And it needs to fit branding, and it needs to fit, a text and a size and a deadline and everything else. And if the person that is making some of the bigger decisions in how things are put out, you unfortunately, they don't know what they're cutting, they don't know what they're shaving off or trying to pare down. And a lot of times they're paring down some things that are really, really important, all for the sake of, no, we have to meet this particular size, which, by the way, just want to throw in there that by particular size, that means some books can't be beyond a certain page size, as well as have to be over a certain page size. So the assumption that leave it in there doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the comparisons between D&D books and Marvel movies are extremely apt.
Yes.
That's why I thought, when I first did Dragon Heist, oh my God, my ADHD is showing so bad because I have something I want to talk about from the corporate art standpoint, but I'm getting off on a totally other tangent. When I was doing my first writing assignment for Wizards itself on Waterdeep Dragon Heist, there was a lot of stuff I put in there that was ultimately changed without my approval by the time it got published. And that's the way of this world, right? You, especially when you're a younger writer, especially when you're a less senior writer, you're working for hire, right? You are creating something for them that instantly becomes theirs the moment you turn it over, and they can do whatever they want with it. And that's just something to understand.
Right. And they own it. Work for hire means specifically you are creating based on their criteria, and that ultimately they have the say and can everything do with it. They own what you create.
Yes. And that is, and doing that a lot is one path towards doing big projects that you have more creative control over. It is one path among several vague paths. Remember when we were talking about how I got into the industry? We'll get back there. We'll get back there eventually. But like by the time that Dragon Heist was published, I had it in my hands, and I was looking through it, and I was kind of surprised and disheartened to see how many things had been completely changed, and my ego took a hit, and I reached out to I reached out to Wolfgang Bauer, who I'd done a lot of work for at Kobold Press in the years building up to Dragon Heist. And I said, Wolfgang, you have done D&D stuff since before Wizards owned it. What is this? What's going on? Do they hate it? Am I bad? And Wolf is like, no, Joey, you're fine. He's like, this happens to everyone. This happens to me. One of the reasons why I write my own books is because I don't like people doing it to me. I'm not sure if he actually said that. I think he did. But it's like, you need to look through the book and find the things of yours that were unchanged and reassess based on that. Don't let the changes completely overwhelm you. Look holistically. And I did. And I went back and I looked holistically. And I found that actually everything that was left unchanged by the editors to fit their vision of the book was the stuff that I actually cared about the most. In Chapter 2 of Dragon Heist, there is a home base for your player characters, Troll Skull Alley, which has a bunch of sort of beloved NPCs who, for example, include the very first non-binary character in a D&D adventure, an NPC, which I'm very proud of as someone who, years after Dragon Heist coming out, me writing the character came out as non-binary themselves. It was that sort of, I'm such a good ally, I'm such a good straight ally. Oh, wait a minute.
Maybe I'm not.
Wait a second. But that was a sort of those are sort of goals I had going in. Was I want to create stories that are at once compelling and also inviting, and Dragon Heist was that. And ultimately, even though Wizards had their own agenda, our agendas were closely enough aligned. Our creative goals were closely enough aligned that the stuff that I really cared about the most was left unchanged. And I guess that's sort of a blessing I want to pass on to any creative who works with a large corporation, is that may all of your turn-ins be left unchanged in the things that you care about the most.
Anyone listening who wants to get into this industry, it's a lot. You will have your ego absolutely hit often. How do you deal with that?
Well, in the case of those first situations, whether it was like a slew of rejections or having something be accepted and then changed without my knowledge, to some degree, the way I took that was first, pure raw devastation. And then I can't believe it. I'm terrible.
I hate it. Yeah.
I hate it. They'll never hire me again. Yeah.
Yep.
And then I would call or email a friend, and it would be, whoever I call depends on what I need. If it's emotional support, if it's intellectual support, if it's professional support, it's like, what do I need? Who do I call? Who is in my support network that can help me through the worst moment of my life ever, for real?
Oh, yeah. That's what it feels like, though.
That's what it feels like. Yes, it feels like the world is ending.
Right? And it feels like nobody's ever going to talk to you again. Nobody's ever going to ask you to do a project. You suck. They only left you on there to be nice or polite, or because they paid you. Like,
my career is over. Yeah.
Yeah, it barely began. And yeah, 100%.
But then, as things go on, even I, who started off as a very thin-skinned little shrimp, you develop a thicker skin, even if you never think you're going to, because it's not about building like armor. It's about building stability on the inside. Yeah, it's not about an armored outside. though thick skin may seem to imply that, is just about building your own self-confidence and knowing that whenever a rejection comes or whenever an unauthorized change comes, it's that you know that you are good enough. And maybe there is something to be seen in that sort of implied note that the rejection or the change reads as to you. And sometimes the note is just, this was good, but it wasn't what we were looking for. And that's
sometimes
fair.
it has absolutely nothing to do with what you've created. It is, I think a huge difference is knowing how the process actually works. And I really wish people who create projects and everything else, or project directors, really sort of explained part of the process, especially to anyone who's new in the industry, and went, hey, by the way, like, this is normal. When I, thankfully enough, I already come from a traditional art background, so I'm used to rejection. But even working, like, the first things I ever did with Wizards of the Coast, I was like, are you fucking serious?
Mm-hmm.
First off, like, it would have been nice if I had originally been told, like, by the way, when we ask you for a draft, we're actually looking for most of the art done.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that. I gave them what I consider an actual draft, which is a really bad sketch of where primarily everything goes. And they're like, are you going to add more? Well, of course, this is the sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of feel like I wasted my time, because I was like, well, then I could have just started drawing and sent you a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Or to have somebody turn around and, like, explain how the art process goes, who you have to talk to who. When I did the cards for Magic the Gathering, I was really, really happy that my art director was like, by the way, it's going to take a long time for us to get a response from the Tolkien estate. Okay, good, because I'm sitting there thinking, like, you all hate my stuff so much, but, like, and now you're not going to use it. And meanwhile, she's like, yeah, no, we just haven't heard anything back yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, please, please, please explain the process to your artists, and especially if they're new in the industry. That's important. No, it's not you.
That's a really good point that you raise, because there is no formal education for any of this.
Correct.
All of the stuff that I learned between being lonely in my college dorm and writing an adventure that I thought would rival Cult of the Reptile God, to doing Dragon Heist with Wizards and everything that followed from there. That was all that was from me, was just kind of floundering around, doing what I thought was right. And I'm lucky I had good instincts, but I had plenty of bad instincts too. No one is telling you from a, like, official standpoint, from a Wizard standpoint, or even from, like, a Paizo standpoint or a Kobold Press standpoint. None of these publishers are saying this is what we're looking for. They may say something kind of like that, right? But no one has a complete style guide that they are willing to share to the people that they want, and much less an actual, like, class about how to write RPGs. I think the closest I've ever seen is Ashley Warren's RPG Writers Workshop, which I believe is still going, and which I believe has turned out some really incredible work. But there are so many fine-grained specifics to writing TTRPGs that go beyond just write well. And they're about style, and they're about technical writing, right? Like, this is not just creative writing you're doing here. This is highly technical stuff, because your words, you're coding in the English language, to quote a Wizards employee. You're doing very specific stuff with the formatting to aid comprehension, right? There's a lot of textbook tricks here to keep information flowing from the page to your brain, because how else are you going to download that info? And that's not just true of source books. It's true of adventures. It's true of every little bit of D&D content you can get. And for me, the only way I was able to do that in 2015 onward was by reading D&D books obsessively and kind of learning subconsciously what the way a D&D book looks like is. I
like
have
what its structure is.
I get turnovers all the time from professional writers that bold magic item names in running text. And to me, that's one of the things, it seems easy to reverse engineer from D&D books that magic item names are always italicized in body text, not bolded. And whenever I see that, there's a part of me, a sort of nasty little part of me that's like, what the fuck? This is the easiest thing in the book. You could learn this just by reading any 5-page segment of a D&D book. Like, just look at it. Look at your source material. And then I tell that part to calm down and don't be a bitch.
Right?
And I will
Shut
then
the
be
fuck
like,
up.
well, no one told them.
Right? Yeah.
Right? Like, yes, it's important to read the source material, but like there was no guide.
Right. So, and here's the thing: are we telling our art directors? Like, I literally just had an email come into me, ask me if I want to do a particular project, and I was like, okay, but can I get the details? And they're like, yeah. So we need the drafts by this time and the finals by this time. How much can you make by then? And I was like, that's not. I don't even know what kind of maps you want. You're gonna have to like come back to me. Tell me what you're looking for. So they did. They came back to me, and instead they told me the page size. And I'm like, no, I don't need to know if it's a full page or not. I need to know, is this a dungeon map? Is this a regional map? Is this a world map? Because these are 3 very different design problems that I have. Each will come with their own different kind of deadline. I can absolutely bang out battle maps and encounter maps. Regional maps take a little longer. World maps take forever.
Mm-hmm.
I put an immense amount of detail in them, and I was like, can you give me a hint as to like what exactly these maps would be?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized a lot of times, like, it is because I am working with an art director who, in my particular case, most art directors don't work with cartographers quite the same. And they refer to us like a regular illustrator. But that doesn't help any, especially if I'm trying to like answer like how many can I do or how much can I accomplish in a particular amount of time. I'm like, oh no. So, it goes down to, I understand NDAs, nobody wants to give out too much information. At the same time, you're not giving anything away by going, hey, we're looking for 5 encounter maps and 1 regional map or 1, continent map, or we're looking for 5 character drawings or whatever. Give us a little bit.
I've been in that boat recently because I have been acquiring writers for a project that is very heavily NDA'd. I've just reached the point where I have to tell myself, you trust these people.
Yes.
You just need to tell them what the project is.
And I think a lot of times, because I get this so much, and I love this, no shade towards anyone who does do this when they go to hire me. I love how much everyone is very precious about their world and how much they don't want to share what they feel is a really, really good idea. And they're worried about someone stealing it, because I fully can understand. But at the same time, while you're going to make a project, at the same time, write out what you can share with your writers or your artists or your cartographers, enough to give us a realistic idea of what you are requesting from us, so we can give you accurate deadlines and accurate timescales and accurate prices. There's a reason I have a very blanket price for everything, because someone will always say, well, yeah, I would love a world map. Okay, well, that's great. How many continents on it? How much landmass is it? Do you want it to scale? Is there any other illustrations going around it? Because I never get this to begin with, it's $4,000 for a world map. I just leave it as a blanket statement like the ones I get. So this just makes it easier. Of course, that changes when I'm actually talking to someone and really, really want to do a project. And it's like, well, what fits your budget? Because I want in on this. That's different.
No one wants to steal your fantasy world. Don't kid yourself. Like, You may have the coolest fantasy world out there, and I legitimately believe you do, right? Every fantasy world has something fucking sick about it. Unless you are 100% convinced that you have somehow, by a miracle, struck onto a concept that's one, brilliant, and two, never been done before, and three, will, despite that, resonate strongly with a big audience, no one's going to steal that. There's no every bit of fantasy is built on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
Sometimes literally, usually figuratively.
Right.
And what all that means is that it is entirely likely that someone on the other side of the world has come up with that exact same idea as you.
Right.
And what matters is not the idea, it's the execution.
100%. Absolutely.
You got to turn that concept into something wonderful with your own two hands by filling it with depth and specificity and character.
Yes. And something that genuinely resonates with more people than just you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is key. I recently talking to someone else who really, really wants to get into cartography, and I was like, yeah, great. Just kind of, you're not gonna get a ton of like world maps or anything else that you'll be able to like reasonably price in the average person's the average person in this community who's going to try and hire you and still make a living wage because they take up so much time. But also you're going to discover that a lot of people think that they have these really, really unique maps. And then when you go to draw it, they could have used pretty much any map you've already previously made. Like this happens to me a lot. At some point during the conversation I have with people, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking that on a world map, you're not going to see these things. No, you're not. Would you like a regional map instead? Yes. Okay, I thought so. The assumption that you need to put everything of your world in a book or out there for people to read or see, like everything has to be on the map or whatever. That is not a good idea either. There is such a thing as too much. And you will lose your readers. You will lose people that would normally be very, very interested. It's a delicate balance.
It's a delicate balance, and I'm not sure I can tell anyone how to strike that balance.
No.
This is art. This is not science.
Well, this is why it should be collaborative.
Tell me more.
Because other people will be the first ones to go, yeah, this is great, but you're kind of losing me. Or how about we do this instead? Because if you tell your idea to 5 people and 5 people have nothing to add to it, then you have gold. Write that shit down. But if anyone can add or suggest a better change or something that would kind of make it a little bit more appealing to more than just yourself, then yeah, listen to those. Please stop, I'm not saying talk about everything that you're going to write till someone's ears fall off. But when you have other really enthusiastic friends, me and Joey here love to talk world building and could probably talk each other hoarse in a single setting, especially if we ever built something together. Talk to other people, especially people who you play the game with or that world build as well, and bounce ideas off of each other and make a collaborative effort. If you write by yourself, you are more likely going to have less things that appeal to a broader audience and less connection. And that connection, because this is such, and I'll say endlessly, this is an incredibly emotional community and industry. We all are looking for connection. We all want to connect with our tribe. We all want people that we feel have that immediate kindred spark with. Those are the people that you tell your stories with. If you do it by yourself, it's a good way to start, but it's not a way to bring other people in. Yeah. I'm so big on community and being able to tell a genuine collaborative story.
That's the thing. I think this is the heart of what we will continue returning to when regardless of what issue we're talking about, is that at the end of the day, what matters most is community here, because that ultimately is what matters most in life. We are hardwired to love community and socialization. We are hardwired to need it, and it fulfills our personal needs, both when we are cared for and when we care. And stories, the telling of stories, I think that's their primary function. You know, there are plenty of ways to tell stories that do the opposite of that, right? That other people, that otherize people, that are propaganda, that trying to galvanize people towards a purpose that is, you know, aggressive, uncaring. But even that, in its way, is a type of community management. It's a type of, you know, establishing very hard and often kind of authoritarian boundaries of who is in the in-group and who is in the out-group. And ultimately, when we talk about wanting RPGs to be a more safer and more inclusive space, what we want is we want to increase the size of the in-group and be and reevaluate critically, thoughtfully, who makes up the out-group. Right? We don't want certain types of, you know, fascist ideology. We don't want hatred in our community. And so we carefully curate for that. Whereas we want people who bring vibrancy and culture and at the risk of putting too fine a point on it, color to our community. That's what we want. We want that joy. We want that expressivity. We don't want this sort of rigid, stale, almost monolithic idea of what is a good story, what is worthwhile in storytelling, what is worthwhile in humanity.
Right. One of my first, when I decided I was going to do this, one of the first people I brought on was Aaron Radney, because he is writing and creating a African cultural adjacent centric, instead of going with the generic European medieval, you know, but still leaving it in fantasy.
Oh, Aaron Radney, the illustrator?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. Sorry, I thought you were talking about a writer, but no. This guy's illustrations are bomb.
He is writing.
Oh, he is.
Oh yeah, he's creating a world. As a matter of fact, the funny thing is, we did the original recording and everything else, and it was great, but towards the end we really got into a lot of nitty gritty, and he was like, can we redo this? Yes. So we actually have another scheduled date so I can bring him in, and so unfortunately he won't be like one of the first people I get to share the episode with, because we want to redo it and really focus on essentially being a person of color in the industry and writing about from his experiences and the stuff that he's learned, and it not being so white European focused. And I love that. And I was like, yeah, no, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because, you know, again, I started playing in the mid 1980s and Satanic Panic and woohoo, and being told girls don't play, and least of all goths don't play, which is really funny.
That's hilarious. Girls don't play, that's stupid on a predictable level. Goths don't play Dungeons and Dragons, that's stupid in an entirely like chaotic brain level. That doesn't make any sense at all.
None whatsoever. We don't play RPGs. What the fuck is Vampire the Masquerade?
No, goths are like they're cousins to nerds. I mean,
right?
That's 1 degree.
Oh my god! Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, that's really funny.
and then to be with people like, oh well, it's one thing to be a D&D player, it's another thing to be a LARPer. What? Wait, what? Isn't it? It's it's the same thing, right? Only we stand up from the table and kind of like role play instead of just sitting at it. That's all. We're just kids that like grass.
I used to have the same mindset. I used to be like, well, I may play D&D, but at least I don't LARP. And that's the sort of thing that changes gradually over time. It's like, no, this is fine. This is fine.
It doesn't.
I went to my very first.
I was going to say, the moment you go to your first LARP, that's it. It changes.
Yeah, and then I went to my first LARP earlier this year, and I was like, oh. I no longer. Well, it was a process, right? Of like whatever that weird stigma that like Hollywood had implanted in my head as a teen, just kind of like winnowed away as I met more cool people who were into LARP and Ren Fair and stuff like that. Until eventually, I was like, okay, I think I can finally gather my courage and go. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm in it.
I think it's the psychology of always wanting to other people. Mm-hmm. And yes. And wanting people that like, oh, I might be bad, but these people, they're worse, And And I always thought that was hilarious because we were even lower than the people that do the war reenactments. Mm-hmm. How are we? It's the same fucking thing. Mm-hmm. Like, fuck. Oh yeah, we would. I have so much.
Very interesting that you bring up war reenactments and stuff like that, because I'll bet LARP did grow out of that, just in the same way that D&D grew out of like miniature war games, but like also like, a form of reenactment. Napoleonic war games that was being played at Lake Geneva back in the 70s when Gygax and co. Started D&D. Huh. I wonder. I'll bet there's an essay there. I'll bet there's an interesting essay there on sort of the martial roots of both of like the major strains of role playing.
Well, so it was really funny. I got into LARPing. My first ever LARP was Vampire the Masquerade, which I think is technically the first actual LARPs. I'm not 100%
I buy that.
Yeah. And as a New Yorker goth, that absolutely fucking fits. But yeah. So I first started LARPing, God knows how long ago. But it was funny because all of my theater kid friends were the ones who were like, let's go LARPing. And I was like, what is LARPing? And they're like, oh, and that was it. Like, you didn't have to convince me. Like, the moment I get to go in costume and role play, whilst like we're having a play. Yes, absolutely. And I get to improv the entire fucking thing. Even I get to hit people with foam covered swords. Yes, I want to beat the shit out of people, but in a safe and consensual way.
I was delighted by the number of just nerdy theater kids that I found at my first LARP.
Yes. Yeah. That's where we live. Yes.
Well, I also encountered an interesting thing in my first LARP, which is kind of a divide between, I guess I would say it as secure and insecure people. Let me talk about what I mean a little bit more. It's that, and I'm specifically talking about people who are secure in the interest and value of their own personal life versus people who are insecure in that, versus people whose main sort of like way of improving their life is pouring it into a LARP character. Mm-hmm. Because me and the friend who got me into this LARP, we were talking about this the other day, where it's like we have both been on immense journeys over the past 2 years for me and 5 years for him to really invest in our own individual lives, because for one reason or another we became very isolated from the things that brought us joy. And I think everyone goes through that to some degree. Certainly living in a world that forces you to dedicate 8 to 12 hours of basically every day to a job, to an uncaring corporate job, if you were unfortunate enough to be one of the many, many people in that sort of corporate world, kind of working for someone who doesn't care about you, doing stuff that you don't really care about. I mean, it's easy for all the color to be drained from your life. And sometimes it can be very scary to try and reinvest in building joy back into your own personal life, and LARP can kind of become an outlet that allows you to create that joy without any sort of personal cost to your own ego, right? To the potential of failure, right? Because that's what's scary about reinventing yourself, is the potential of failure, I think. And it's very, I think it manifests typically, at least in my experience, as people who will create uber badasses in games. And this isn't just LARP, this is TTRPGs also, I should say. But I feel like it's more pronounced in LARP, who will create uber badasses who are, Johnny Six Guns or whatever. And then there's me and my friend who are like, you know what, we have spent a lot of time doing some really hard work creating lives that we enjoy for ourselves, and I am going to play a banker in this Wild West town. And whatever comes of that will come of that, but we are going to play a stupid little bureaucrat who will absolutely get eaten by a monster at the first available opportunity.
Right. I just want something simplistic that I can have fun with. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing I have to put. I mean, and I've been kind of on both, because at one point, first of all, if any listener doesn't quite know how Vampire the Masquerade runs, there's a lot. There's a lot of triggers that could occur. It's a lot of politics. It's a lot of I shouldn't say a lot of politics. Yes. In that the clans are political with each other. It's not like U.S. politics are not being mentioned. Well, I mean, sometimes a little, especially if it's pertaining to a particular region. But we just mean like there's a lot of hierarchy that goes on, and a lot of answering to sometimes to very primal needs, and sometimes to political needs. So it's a lot, to say the least. And then on top of it, you get to your clan kind of is your family in the space. And I mean this in every sense of the word, where like you will do anything for your family, or you have the world's worst dysfunctional family, depending on how you're playing. So, but it was one of the most therapeutic experiences of my life when I started LARPing Vampire the Masquerade, because I do come from a broken home. I have a very dysfunctional family. I experienced, being gaslit. I had to deal with drugs in my household. Just tons of stuff that, there's just so much a therapist can unpack in a while. How do you not take that out with the people that you love, that is around you, when you're not playing tabletop RPGs or not LARPing? And I met some amazing friends, which I still play the game with now. They're part of my group. And that you get to go up and say, hey, listen, I've had a really, really shitty week. I need to cry, but I can't just like randomly start crying. So let's do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to have friends that let you like, yeah, I'm feeling aggressive. I'm hyped up. Can I beat the shit out of you with a buffer? Is that okay? Can I just like go to fucking town? And it, to have that kind of trust that you end up building and everything else. And then at the same time, it's like, yep, nope, I got all of that out last week. This week, no, it's okay. I'll take a hit. I'll die for the team,
And I should specify, I think, that, just because you want to play a cool badass in your game does not make you a loser. That's not what I mean to say at all. Especially in games like D&D and Vampire, which kind of encourage you to be a huge fucking badass. Like that's kind of the point of those games. No. When it comes down to it, you create the story that you want to see in your life, and it's just an incredibly powerful outlet. I've just found that in my own self, it can be easy to use that outlet exclusively, rather than also investing in your own individual well-being too.
And can I ask, how does all of this work with you having ADHD?
That's a very good question, and one that I'm not sure that I can respond to with any sort of clinical precision, because I do not have medication. I have taken those little what do you call them? Tests, basically evaluations. Little evaluations. It's like, yeah, you probably got some level of ADHD. But it's not something that I've really pursued diagnosis for, largely because the path to getting diagnosed with ADHD is an ADHD person's worst nightmare. It's just absolute hell of ring jumping throats. So I continue on my path, knowing that yes, I have a very easy time getting distracted from what I'm doing. It takes a lot of work to keep me on task and not sort of diverted towards social media. Do I self-medicate with a lot of caffeine? Yes, absolutely, I do.
Do you have anything that you specifically do during your day to keep you from being distracted or on task, or?
Yeah, I do actually. And it's all very simple stuff. I keep a running checklist every single day that allows me to get little victories
Nice.
throughout the day. Little victories are basically the thing that keeps me going. When I was really on Twitter all the time, I broke that cycle by deleting the app from my phone and blocking the site on my desktop, which I've since relaxed a little bit, because I'm not swapping to Twitter every, I'll write one sentence and go back to Twitter. I'll write one sentence and go back to Twitter. That's death. But I'll do that. I have the biggest crisis for me when it comes to this is that I am kind of caught between knowing that I have a lot to do and not being able to summon the motivation or the focus in order to do it. So I wind up sitting at my desk in misery for sometimes even a full day, basically, and I will just basically be doing nothing because I can't rally myself into actually doing it. But I know I should be doing it, so I can't take a break. I have to just sit here and suffer. And so I've been getting better slowly at actually taking breaks, taking good breaks. Because in the past, I've been very good at just kind of muscling through it. And sometimes that sort of anxiety, that stress can put me into a focused state and allow me to muscle through it. But it's not healthy. It's not healthy for my stress levels. It's not healthy for my activity levels. It's not healthy for, the amount of creative media I consume, because I need to fuel myself creatively somehow. I need to watch movies and play video games and be out in nature and read books and all of that.
And it can't be good for your relationships either, because then the people that you're with one may not even know that you have it because you're just pushing through everything, but also don't know how to react when that comes to a head and things sort of fall apart.
Mm-hmm. And to say nothing of my relationship to my own work and to my hobby, which are the exact same thing in this scenario, right? The amount of burnout I've had on my own for fun D&D games in the past couple of years has been immense, and I'm only now kind of bouncing back into it when I can, set good, clear internal boundaries for myself about what is work and what is not. Right.
And that, especially for us, it is a very delicate balance and a very blurry line. I love to create. I will sit down and literally draw for anywhere from 6 to 12 hours in a day because I am so obsessed with what I'm making. And then my wife has to unclench my hand from around my pen because I can't release it, and she's like, come to bed. Oh my God, and then at the same time, it changes the expectations other people have of what I can and can't do. So it's got to be the same for you.
This makes me, I'm going to tell my origin story very slowly over the course of this 5-hour miniseries, bit by bit. It'll keep you on tenterhooks the entire time. But no, it makes me think of that period kind of between when I got my first paid gig in 2015 and between, 2020, 2021, in the midst of the pandemic. That was an incredibly productive time for me creatively. I produced so much, but it was also, it's like it was burning through my stamina and then burning through whatever, through my health bar underneath my stamina to continue pushing. Because I had lost sight of kind of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations here, right? I wanted to be productive. I wanted to secure a place for myself in this field that would not be so tenuous. This is an incredibly unstable field, and I wanted to, just like hit the nitro and get myself to a place where, like, no matter what happened, I have established myself, and I can take a break. I can step back if I need to, but I've established myself. And that's when the burnout really starts to happen, doing 4 different things at once. I was doing stuff for Kobold Press. I was an intern at Geek and Sundry. I was creating my own stuff for the DMs Guild, and I was doing stuff for EN World at the same time. All 4 of those things were happening at the same time, and then kind of bit by bit, one will shuffle off. But because I have this inability to say no, another thing will shuffle right back onto its space because I've gotten so excited about it, right? I'll let Geek and Sundry go because I'm graduating, and then it's Projects with Wizards, and then all of a sudden I'm dropping the EN World thing because I'm too busy, but also I'm going straight to D&D Beyond, and it's all these amazing, wonderful, awesome things that I love, and they're great for my career, and I enjoy them until I just hit a wall, and I'm it's like I've been punched in the face, and all of a sudden, like, why am I not enjoying my work anymore? Oh, right, because you're killing yourself over it.
Right. And we won't even, or maybe we will because we're going on tangents. Like, the whole thing with Critical Role, first off, like, even if they weren't as, because both of us kind of started when they weren't as big as they are now, Matt is incredibly infectious with his love of creating and gaming.
Mm-hmm.
It is so hard to ever say no to him you feel like you're kicking a puppy to say no to Matt. Like, so even if you are completely booked for 2 years of doing projects, if you start talking to Matt about a world and everything else, and he goes, yeah, I'd like to do a continent map, I'm like, sure, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, you need a prop map of it too? Well, funny thing, I make prop maps. You need it in 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah, I'll make it happen. Yeah. Because, one, it is terrifying. This is an industry where even if you're established, you may never get asked to do another project again. And we're all really aware of that. I say it numerous times, there's no project that is ever going to set you for life. So, unfortunately, it does perpetuate the hustle culture. But on top of it, to have something that ends up as infectious as everything that was going on with Critical Role, and it being so exciting and so interesting, and having someone like Matt who world builds on the same level or greater, technically, becoming friends with them, and because you always want to see your friends succeed. So the moment you become friends with them, it's like, all right, well, what can I do to make this better? Fuck it, it's my free time, I don't care. And it's really hard to say no, especially when you have a ton of stuff already going on in your life. And not because it's Critical Role, it's because these are friends and people that feel the same way that you do, that they're your kindred spirits, they're your tribe. They're like, oh my God, you've been over my house, we've sat down and talked. World building, can't shut the fuck up about it, even if we try.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it just becomes all consuming, and you don't realize that you are absolutely burning your candle at both ends, because one's a job, or one's, oh yeah, I'm doing this to get my name out there, and the other one's like, oh, this is just me doing a project with friends, you know, and it's you realize that you've slept 4 hours in a week. You know, it's really hard to find like, okay, 5 o'clock, turning everything off, gonna go out and touch grass or something. I do want to touch on being outside the in crowd. So I made a thread on Twitter not too long ago talking about how just about everybody that I talk to in this space, regardless of the level of success and or fame that they feel personally that they've accomplished, almost all of us feel at one point or another that we're on the outside of something and everyone else is kind of on the inside. And part of that is because, you know, some people just end up working really well together, so they always want them on the same projects. And, you know, that makes other people feel like, well, that means that they're never going to be included. Sometimes it's just, you know, feeling like there's no way to get your art out there or your writing out there, or that you're just not good enough to be included. And I love to stress that that is not the case. It's just for a very small community, we're also rather large, and vice versa. We do have a large community, but it's also kind of small in comparison to all the other things out there. That a lot of times it is hard to get your stuff noticed and hard for you to get noticed unless you are genuinely making actual connections. If you are somebody who's just posting your stuff, that's great. We'll click the like button, but we'll move on. If you're not engaging, and this is hard, especially for those that are really, really shy, unfortunately, your name never comes up in conversation. And it's hard on every level. There was a point where, I think it was last year or whatever, where nobody was like asking me to do any projects. I think it was last summer, last autumn, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, did I do something? Did I like whatever? And then I realized I had just dropped off of social media because I was just so overwhelmed with everything going on. I kind of stopped talking to people. And, you know, that's the other reason why I was like, I'm going to do a podcast, because I miss y'all.
And I've missed you.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect excuse. Pencil me in, God damn it. But have you also experienced this?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting topic for me, because I have in some ways done things, you know, I have found ways to isolate myself unintentionally, but there are also ways that I've found myself removing myself from this industry intentionally, and I'll get into both of those things. You know, writing can be a very solitary endeavor, for one. It is very easy, and publishing sometimes even worse, because you will be NDA'd and you will have to wait a year or two before your work is published in the public eye and you can talk about it. So, you know, in that way, often you find yourself just kind of sitting in a dark room, just kind of waiting for the next thing while you're churning away on something else. And if you are, you know, as someone who typically these days leads projects, I at least have the sort of benefit of having a community of creatives that I can kind of network with as part of my job. But, you know, when I was just freelancing, you know, I would often be on projects with like you or my pal James Intricasso or my pal Dan Dillon, and you know, we would be technically on the same project. We'd never talk to each other because the stuff we were doing was completely siloed away. And so, you know, even though we had this connection on Twitter and we loved chatting, and you know, engaging in the discourse of the day was fun, and we would see each other at cons, you know, anything beyond that, it just never really happened. And so as time went on and the discourse of the day on social media became less and less palatable to me, and I think to many other people as well, I found myself not engaging on Twitter as much because I felt like I didn't have anything interesting to say, or the things that were being said didn't interest me. In fact, they stressed me out more than they piqued my interest. And much like you, I found myself in the past few months just telling myself I'm just not going to go on Twitter at all. Or if I am, it's only going to be for very short bursts and infrequently. Because even when I wasn't, I was only doom scrolling. There was no more community building for me. I was in this sort of malaise of Twitter. And I found as Twitter, slowly asphyxiates, that going on to Hive and Blue Sky, it's like I don't really have anything I want to post over there either. Right. I think that style of social media has just lost its appeal to me. Discord is a little bit better. Instagram, because of its photo-based nature, is a little bit better, but it's like I would rather engage with my friends in the real world. And a lot of my IRL friends are not my RPG industry friends, because my RPG industry friends are way spread out. You at least are in the same state, but I still haven't seen you face to face in years,
right?
Just because of the nature of the world right now. And to say nothing of my industry friends who live in New York, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So a lot of my close relationships right now, it's honestly been kind of a pendulum swing, because it used to be basically all of my socialization was through my industry friends, because we related to each other, and I was like addicted to the internet, and like I gotta be there. Right.
Fear of missing out is for real.
Yeah, and the FOMO was real, and I was, I was almost manically obsessed with my career. It was the main thing in life that brought me joy, or at least brought me purpose. Right. And now I find a lot more purpose in the connections I have with my friends, just going to go get coffee together, or or make dinner out on the grill together. And a lot of those people are removed from RPGs. They might be in my D&D group, but they aren't in the industry, and so they don't care about the industry drama. And honestly, that feels amazing. So many of my chats with people in the industry right now are a little bit of happiness, a little bit of happy-go-lucky, and a whole lot of doom and gloom, because everything seems to be a disaster at all times.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And let me just say, I'm so glad that our conversation today has not been that. We've had our gripes, we have our little ironic, sardonic twists of the mouth when we're talking about the things that go on here, but it's like, no, we have a lot of joy to share and a lot of excitement to share here, and it's real.
So jokingly last night, it's probably because so I've been talking to Wandering DM, and we hang out every Tuesday. We either play D&D, or we just like sit over Discord while we're playing our individual games. Me, him, my wife, and a couple other friends, just to be social. Because as somebody who is, stuck at home, being immune compromised, I still can't go out and do anything, which, so my friends are really awesome and bring it to me, which is great. But I was like, hey, let's record a podcast. And we spent a good portion of the night going, oh my God, this is the shitty part of this. This is the hard part of being part of the industry. We did a lot of negativity as well. And then I was like, we need to bring that back and have some positivity, because there is a lot. It's an emotional roller coaster to be a part of this community. So much goes on behind the scenes that people who aren't active in the industry or with bigger companies or bigger names don't ever see, and you only hear a fraction of. And sometimes it is so personal for people involved that it's like, can I just not be included in this at all? I'm just gonna go hide somewhere else, because this technically has nothing to do with me. And it becomes really, really overwhelming. But I'm always afraid that will deter people from wanting to create and be a creative as a living. Yes, there's a lot of negativity anywhere in the world. But to be honest with you, my worst day doing this for a living is far better than my best day doing anything else.
Yeah. I agree, and that's why we stick with it. You know, it's not without its challenges. It's still a job, but it's a job that, you know, brings us joy and allows us to be in that joyful space to some degree or another every single day. And I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that I've found a way that suits me, the place I am in my life right now, a way to have better boundaries between this job that I love and the rest of my life. That has been something I have not really been able to bring myself to do for a very long time, and I've desperately needed it.
Right.
So, you know, having my job be my job, and I'll keep those work things isolated to work, and then I'll have strong friendships outside of it, and they can also be my hobby pals, but they're not involved in the work. That has been so valuable to me.
Yeah.
And I have seen that happen in a handful of other colleagues of mine as well, where they have had to really take a step back.
If you don't, you will just burn out so hard.
This industry is so stupidly cutthroat. I mean, as we've been saying this entire time, not only is it cutthroat insofar as if you stop creating, you die, right? It's publish or perish, but for us. It's cutthroat because it's just kind of bitchy. There's a lot of really nasty people around here sometimes.
Oh my God.
I love my friends and they are wonderful. But there's a lot of people, there's so much discourse I see every single day. And sometimes it's very valuable. Like sometimes it's this person's a sexual abuser. I'm like, get them the fuck out of here. I'm like, good, I'm glad that happened. But sometimes it's just like, and this person was mean to me on Discord. And I'm like, I don't need to see your drama. I don't need to see your call-up posts. Deal with it, handle it. This person is probably not the monster you think they are right now. Just don't talk to them for a year. Come back fresh. I don't need to see this.
Some people just fucking stumble. Everybody has bad days. And if you're judging everybody by a single bad day, you should point the mirror at yourself. You know, my favorite metaphor for this is, you know, when you're driving a car and as you're driving along, all of a sudden somebody behind you is blaring on their horn. Mm-hmm. And they're now mad. That person now thinks that you have purposefully cut them off. That you somehow know who they are, caught into traffic just to be a dick to them. And you watch these people get angry and try and be vindictive. I have a relative that would drive into oncoming traffic in order to drive around someone else and then slow down in order to, quote unquote, teach them a lesson. I'm like, all you're teaching them is that you're a dick and you're willing to risk your own life and your passengers. Here's the thing. That person went out in front of traffic, probably thought you were further away than you are. You don't exist to them. They are driving. They don't know you. And so they're just going on with their life. Unfortunately, you were closer than they thought and they cut you off. Or you want to go faster than they do, and they're slowing you down. It isn't personal. It's not against you.
Yeah.
You know, I've actually had people message me and tell me that they don't understand why I'm being so hostile towards them. And I'm like, what are you talking? Who are you? What are you talking about? Like, when have I been hostile towards you? And it's from, and you've witnessed it, almost all my friends have, that I am, every once in a while, I just state a fact and it's very succinct and I have no emotional indicators for things. And because of that, the default for most people is to assume that I'm angry or upset. And I'm like, no. No, I'm just making a statement. There's no emotion involved in it, so I don't add any. You know,
just view me with some Vulcan ears on for the moment, and like that will solve this problem.
Exactly, you know. But and the person was actually very, very upset, and I was like, again, I'm sorry. That isn't my intention. I'm not being hostile towards you. And then, of course, it happened again, and I'm like, okay, clearly we can't communicate. I'm just gonna not talk around you anymore, you know, because, you know, and this isn't
working.
Right. And that's okay. Don't assume that, someone else being direct has to do with you, But by all means, also don't sit there and let somebody be a bad actor and just like not say anything. I have one more question for you that I actually wanted to ask you over tea years ago, because you had mentioned something about DMing and being good DMs and everything else. What makes a good DM for you? Because we kind of touched on this. Yes. And I loved where that conversation was going, and I want my listeners to hear it.
Yeah, let's bring it back. Good DMing means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I just want to say that up front. We've said earlier that, there are so many different valid ways of playing D&D. That's the nature of D&D, right? It's a game that wants to appeal to a very broad audience. There are many other smaller games that have a very specific way of playing in mind, but D&D wants to have the dungeon bashers, the combat optimizers, the storytellers, the LARPers. It wants to have everyone in the big tent. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, there are all sorts of little specific bits of DMing praise that I can give. It's like, always has NPC names on hand, is always able to be immediately emotionally available to whatever the scene requires. And it's like that, those to me are all hallmarks of a great DM, but not every great DM has them. No, to me, the number one hallmark of a great DM, applicable to every type of DMing out there, is being a fan of your players.
Yes. Oh God, yeah.
And that can be in any pillar of D&D. You can want to absolutely murder those player characters. If you are a demon of a DM who throws the hardest, most Dark Soulsian combat challenges at them, week in, week out, you can still be the biggest fan of your players and be rooting for them every bloody second that you slog through the most vicious combats imaginable. Or, you can be a fan of your players by setting up enormous fun set pieces that you have meticulously planned for them to win in some way. Or you can be a fan of your players in social settings that you have engineered to make the most of their backstories. You can be a fan of your players in social settings where you have kind of just thrown scenarios into the mix and you trust that they will work it out all right because they are that good of improvisers, and they can always come up with something funny and witty on the fly. Being a fan of your players, I think, necessitates you knowing your players and what they like, and what will create a good gaming environment for them. And that level of, here it is again, community, your clear indication to them that you are excited for them, I think that builds their ability to be excited for you and for your story. And all of a sudden you're passing this sort of excitement for one another back and forth, and it builds upon itself every time it's volleyed back. Every time you give something to the players and they give something back to you, that makes the game stronger, makes the story stronger, makes the encounters stronger. It builds investment in the game, and that's what we're after. Investment, immersion, whatever you want to call it. We are here for the game to be as gripping as it possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're just playing a beer and pretzels game, even if the game is not the most important part, you want the experience to be the thing that binds you together. You want the friendship to be the thing that binds you together. That will come from loving each other, even in the nastiest combats you can prepare.
Or not, because I am currently going through with my players a non-combat game. Mm-hmm. We, with all the violence and everything else that's going on in the real world around us, we had a conversation and we're just like, how much of this game can we play without combat? And I was like, well, let's fucking find out, And so we actually are, and it's interesting because it has allowed us to kind of stretch our imaginations, those muscles just a little bit more than normal, because we're still playing. Well, we're not playing D&D because we created our own homebrew and everything else, but we're playing an RPG where there's still an element of there still needs to be some adversary, or some conflict going on.
Yeah.
So it's okay, well, fine if technically their characters aren't passives, but because the opportunity could be there, but we learned to change the rules and everything else of engagement, so they had a much different experience when meeting up with somebody that they would normally just go into combat with, and they are loving this. Like, they joke about they can't wait till the next time they actually do end up in combat because it's been a while. And that always lets your players kind of like, yay, this is what my character can do. But my God, are they finding really fun ways to do that out of combat. And let your players tell the story that they want and they will let you tell the story you want. A genuine collaboration between you and your players, which is really hard to find. You need to find the right table. Don't stay with the table that isn't working for you.
No, bad D&D is worse than no D&D in my experience.
Right.
It's not like pizza where even bad pizza is good pizza.
Right.
No.
I'm a New Yorker. Bad pizza's bad. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, I'm from Seattle, so bad pizza is still good. But
yeah.
No, the thing about I've been wondering if saying be a fan of your players is clear enough, because I think it can be a little bit vague. When I say be a fan of your players, what I think truly mean is you want to always be excited for what the players are going to do next. Like, no matter what they do, it's going to be thrilling. Things are going to be wild, and like, you can't force that to happen. You can create things within yourself, sort of emotional touch points within yourself that will allow you to be like, okay, let's recenter myself. This may have frustrated me now, but let's go back and actually look at it somewhat objectively. Is this exciting? Can I get excited about this? You can have strategies to make it easier for you to get into that headspace, but it's entirely possible that you are going to be DMing for a group that simply does not jibe with you.
Right.
And like I said, no D&D is better than bad D&D. If you can't get into a headspace where you are a fan of your players, get out of there. Because not only do you deserve better than that, the players deserve better than that.
Yes. It's, I can't stress enough, I've been saying this almost every episode now, just because somebody doesn't quite click with you at the table, whether you're a player or a DM, it's not you as a person. It can be your play style. It can be the type of story. Like right now, my players, like I said, are trying a no combat campaign, which I like a little bit of both. I like less combat than a lot of other people do, but I still love conflict. It just has to be done in the right way, But always, it isn't necessarily you're doing a bad job as a DM. If they don't like the game that you run, it could just be it's not what they're looking for. Same thing with other players. Some people just don't have the same play style that works well together. Doesn't mean they're a bad player. It does not against you. It's just how it is at the table. Me and Kate May said the other day that finding a good D&D table is harder than dating.
Yes.
Yeah. It's easier to find a person that you want to spend the rest of your life with than a bunch of people you want to play D&D with for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, because not only do you two have to get along together, it's all five of you have got to find ways to enjoy each other's company and
right.
do that week after week. Oh yeah, no joke. I know plenty of people who are in the sort of greater Seattle polyamory scene that basically only play D&D with their poly partners, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you've done the hard part already, basically.
Right. Of course you can fucking play with them. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is half the point of having 3 people who you're dating is to have a full D&D group every week.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, oh man, see that? See, I'm polyamorous as well, and part of me is like, well, if only I was up to dealing with other people right now. No. I have so much going on. It's hard enough as it is. I don't need to add to it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I do like, and to bring it up, I do like being queer in this space.
Yes.
It's a great space to be queer in, and I love, again, coming from the 1980s and watching it go from neckbeards in their basement being told, essentially having the most disgusting things done, said, or referenced about my female characters and or me, to what it is now, and to be an openly queer woman, a disabled woman, much less, in this space, and not have it, 1, be the focus that everybody fucking comments on, and 2, not have it the thing that everyone looks down upon, or even for that matter, as we like to call it, inspiration porn. I love where this community is going. We're not quite there yet. We still have a lot of bumps going along. But I mean, it is so much better than it ever was.
No, it makes me so happy to see the amount of queer joy in this community right now.
Yeah.
And I will say this, speaking as an insider here, a lot of the messiness we see online is because of the queer community as well. We can often be a messy bunch. Because emotions run high in this community. It's one that is full of drama and conflict and people establishing boundaries for the very first time, and there's just a lot of angst that pours over. But even though I often find myself retreating from that because I don't enjoy it. I would not trade all of that joy that has been created, all of that feeling of belonging and that sense of empowerment for a more peaceful, less chaotic world. It's a price I would pay every single day, because I can set my own boundaries. I can set my own boundaries of how I use the internet and how I engage with that community.
Here's the thing: without any of that chaos, without any of that conflict, we wouldn't have the community we do.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's such a great thing to keep in mind when sort of bemoaning the unending drama of the TTRPG community, is that it is simply the price we pay for having a creatively vibrant community, and it's on us to boundary set. Right? There's this will date the podcast a little bit, but that sort of Jonah Hill controversy came up recently, and so it's drawn a lot of attention to what is setting a boundary and what is controlling behavior.
I actually don't know what that is.
Oh, don't worry about it. So the actor Jonah Hill was using like therapy speak to like be kind of coercive, controlling with a girlfriend, and it's kind of spilled into the broader therapy-minded wash of the internet. But gotcha. All this to say, that bit of discourse has raised this very clear definition for boundary setting that's been great for me, both in a personal but also right now in a professional sense. Is a boundary is something that you set that concerns your involvement. It doesn't dictate anyone else's actions. You cannot dictate anyone else's actions, but you can curate the space that you exist in and choose whether or not you want to be there.
Yes.
And who you surround yourself with, that sort of thing. So if you can find ways to curate your community and set boundaries that are useful to you, then that chaos is absolutely a beautiful thing. It's a necessary part of being a good artist.
It is hard and it's frustrating, yes. But at the same time, if we aren't speaking up and talking about the things that upset us and setting boundaries and saying, yes, we're okay with this. No, we're not. And it's okay if you don't realize that you have a boundary until something happens. It is okay to not realize that you had a boundary and to suddenly go, oh, wait, we need to stop and not do that again. Because the realism is there are times where you are just going through life and you trip over something that you didn't see. You trip over a crack in the sidewalk that you just didn't see. And until that happens, you don't think to look for it. But next time you're on that piece of sidewalk, you know to look. And, it's okay to, one, change your mind. Just because you say something once doesn't mean it's absolutely set in stone for the rest of your life.
I know, even though internet people will try and be like political pundits and catch you in a gotcha, you are not a politician. You are a regular ass human being who happens to be on the world's stupidest, most public platform of all time. So don't worry about it. You can be a complex human who fucks up and grows and changes their opinion on things. That's fine.
Yeah, just learn to give an actual apology.
That's
me throwing shade.
Oh my god, yeah. The amount of fake, garbage, self-serving, egotistical apologies that come up in this community are so frequent. And it's because of insecurity, it's because of ego, it's because of all these things that prevent you from actually engaging with people as people. Right? It's everything that blocks you from creating community. That's what creates those garbage apologies, because you're an absolute, you're self-serving, you're a narcissist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, and again, hopefully you don't ever have to be in the position where you need to make a public apology.
Right.
My best advice to that is, don't victim blame. And genuinely apologize. Don't add the word but in anything, and you'll probably be a lot better than most.
Oh my god, for real. Yeah, and it means you have to think about what you say. You need to really consider. You need to talk it through with people, and that's what having people around is for. It's so hard to do right now because I feel like we're all more isolated in our little online communities than we ever have been ever before. But just try not to be afraid of judgment. Ask people what you did wrong. Ask people if your viewpoint makes sense to them.
Right. Or ask before you do it.
Or ask before you do something. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is always such a hard topic to get on about because I am someone who very naturally goes to the state of, I am constantly learning. I know nothing.
Right.
I value the insights of other people so far highly above my own. I will go to them hat in hand first every time. That was my natural state of being for a very long time, and it's only been quite recently that I have been like, no, wait, actually, I'm pretty fucking great. I know more than I give myself credit for. I have experienced more and have more wisdom than I give myself credit for. So no, I can be confident and stand up for myself and know that. And too much of either one will make you, dysfunctional in one way or another.
Absolutely.
You just need to make sure that you are self-aware, because self-awareness and introspection will give you the clear view on whether you are too much of one or the other.
Right. Yeah, everything in moderation. Although I had a friend of mine when I was talking about doing the podcast is like, are you sure you want to put your muchness out in the world?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Because even though I come across as being an extremely confident person and I'm very muchness, I get that. But also, believe it or not, I have a balance with that. Which means, yes, the other half of that's pretty fucking extreme as well. But yes, I am somebody who loves to learn, and I will absolutely ask anyone else.
Well, I'll say this, Deven, thank you so much for having me on the show. It makes me really happy to talk with you about all this stuff in such great depth and breadth that I never really have the opportunity to talk to in a more structured or larger podcast. So I've been James Haeck. I create all sorts of RPG content. All of the stuff I'm working on right now is deeply under NDA, but do follow the people who I create things for. Look at Ghostfire Gaming, look at Critical Role, and keep an eye out for my name, because I think the stuff I make is pretty damn cool.
Oh, absolutely.